The afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of classroom 3B, casting long shadows across the alphabet charts and colorful student artwork that covered every available wall. I sat cross-legged on the reading rug, my hands moving in fluid, practiced motions as I signed the story of the very hungry caterpillar to the 6 children seated in a semicircle around me. Marco Moretti watched my hands with an intensity that made my heart ache. At 6 years old, he was the youngest in my deaf and hard-of-hearing classroom at Ashford Academy, and by far the most isolated. While the other children had been immersed in sign language and deaf culture from birth, Marco had only started learning 8 months ago, after his mother had left, and his father had finally, reluctantly, enrolled him in my program. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. On Monday, he ate through 1 apple, I signed, my fingers forming each word with deliberate clarity, but he was still hungry. Marco's small hands mimicked my movements. His dark eyes, so much like his father's, I'd noticed during our brief interactions, narrowed in concentration. His signing was improving rapidly, but there was something heartbreaking about watching a child who should have been fluent in his native language from birth, struggling to catch up at 6. Miss Bennett? The voice of Principal Hutchins crackled through the intercom mounted above my desk. Could you come to the main office when you have a moment? There's been a situation. I glanced at the clock. 15 minutes until dismissal. I signed to my teaching assistant, Rebecca, asking her to finish the story, then stood and brushed off my navy blue cardigan. Marco's hand shot up, his face anxious. Where are you going? He signed, the movement small and uncertain. I'll be right back. I signed with a reassuring smile. Miss Rebecca will finish the story. I promise I won't miss pickup time. The relief on his face was palpable. Marco had abandonment issues, that much was clear. His mother's departure had left visible scars, and he clung to routine and familiar faces with a desperation that broke my heart daily. The walk from my classroom to the main office took less than 2 minutes, but dread settled in my stomach with each step. A situation at Ashford Academy usually meant angry parents, and angry parents usually meant my job was about to become significantly more complicated. Ashford Academy catered to Chicago's elite, the children of CEOs, politicians, old money families, and, if the whispers were to be believed, at least one mafia boss. The school's willingness to accommodate my deaf and hard-of-hearing program was admirable, but it came with strings attached. Parents who paid $40,000 a year in tuition expected perfection, and they weren't shy about demanding make it. The main office was unnaturally quiet when I entered. Mrs. Patterson, the secretary who usually greeted everyone with grandmotherly warmth, looked up at me with something close to fear. He's in conference room B, she whispered, as if speaking at normal volume might summon something terrible. Principal Hutchins is already in there. She asked for you specifically. I'd suggest. Well, just be careful, dear. My confusion must have shown on my face because Mrs. Patterson leaned closer. It's Marco Moretti's father. He's very upset about something. Just choose your words carefully. Dante Moretti. I'd only met him 3 times in the 8 months since Marco had enrolled. Once during initial registration, when he'd signed the paperwork with barely concealed impatience, his jaw tight and his responses clipped. Once at the fall open house, where he'd appeared for exactly 12 minutes, flanked by 2 men in dark suits who'd remained by the door, and once during a brief pickup when his usual driver had been delayed. Each time, I'd been struck by the same thing, his complete inability to communicate with his own son. He didn't know sign language. He made no effort to learn. He simply issued commands to whichever hearing assistant was with Marco, never once looking directly at the boy whose eyes desperately sought his father's attention. It had made me furious. It still did. I straightened my shoulders, smoothed down my cardigan, and knocked on the conference room door before entering. The scene inside made me stop short. Principal Hutchins sat at the head of the long mahogany table, her usually composed expression strained. Marco stood beside her chair, his small body rigid, his eyes red-rimmed and swimming with unshed tears, and at the other end of the table stood Dante Moretti, all 6 feet 3 inches of barely controlled rage, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Completely unacceptable. His voice was a thunderclap in the enclosed space, echoing off the walls with enough force to make Principal Hutchins flinch. I pay a fortune for this school, and this is what I get? My son comes home with bruises, and no one can tell me what happened? Marco's shoulders hunched at his father's volume, his small hands beginning to tremble. "Mr. Moretti, I assure you we're investigating," Principal Hutchins began, but Dante cut her off. "Investigating? Investigating?" His voice rose even higher. "My son was hurt on school property, under your supervision, and please don't yell," I said quietly, stepping fully into the room. "He can't hear you." The words cut through Dante's tirade like a knife through silk. He turned to face me, his dark eyes, yes, exactly like Marco's burning with fury that now had a target. Up close, he was even more imposing than I remembered. Expensive charcoal suit tailored perfectly to his powerful frame, dark hair styled with casual precision, strong jawline set in a hard line. Everything about him screamed power, control, danger. "Excuse me?" His voice dropped to a deadly quiet that was somehow more intimidating than his shouting. "Who are you?" "Sophia Bennett," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the way my heart hammered against my ribs. "I'm Marco's teacher, and I'm telling you that yelling doesn't help. Your son is deaf, Mr. Moretti. He can't hear your anger, but he can feel it. Look at him." Dante's gaze flickered to Marco, and something flashed across his face. Was it shame? Regret? Before the mask of fury slammed back into place. "I know my son is deaf," he said through gritted teeth. "What I don't know is why he came home today with a bruise on his arm and no explanation from the school that's supposed to be protecting him." My attention shifted immediately to Marco. I crouched down to his eye level, my hands moving as I signed. "Can I see your arm?" Marco hesitated, his eyes darting between me and his father, then slowly rolled up the sleeve of his uniform shirt. There, on his upper arm, was indeed a bruise purple and yellow, roughly hand-shaped, definitely not from a simple playground accident. My blood ran cold. "Who did this?" I signed, keeping my expression calm even as anger simmered beneath my skin. "You can tell me. You're not in trouble." Marco's lower lip trembled. His small hands moved in shaky, uncertain signs. "Ethan, during recess. He grabbed me, said mean things. I couldn't understand all the words. He was talking too fast. Ethan Morrison, 8 years old, hearing, from one of Chicago's wealthiest families, and, I'd noticed over the past month, becoming increasingly aggressive toward the deaf students during unstructured time. "Did you tell the recess monitor?" Marco shook his head, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. She was far away. I tried to tell her with my voice, but the words came out wrong. She didn't understand. Ethan laughed. The words came out wrong. God, that hurt. Marco's speech was developing, but he was self-conscious about it, especially around hearing children who sometimes mocked the way deaf children's voices sounded. The fact that he'd tried to advocate for himself and been ignored made my protective instincts flare. I stood slowly, turning to face Dante Moretti. His expression had shifted from fury to confusion as he'd watched the exchange he couldn't understand. "Marco," says another student grabbed him during recess. I said, my voice hard. "An 8-year-old boy named Ethan Morrison." Marco tried to report it to the recess monitor, but he struggled to make himself understood verbally, and the monitor didn't notice the signs. She was too far away. Principal Hutchins' face paled. "Sophia, are you certain? That's a serious accusation." "I'm certain because Marco just told me," I interrupted, probably overstepping every professional boundary but too angry to care. "In sign language, which is his primary language, which he used to clearly communicate exactly what happened. The question is why there wasn't a signing adult supervising recess when we have 6 deaf students in this school. We have budget constraints. Then maybe we should consider whether Ashford Academy is truly equipped to serve deaf students," I said bluntly, "if basic safety accommodations are beyond the budget." The silence that followed was arctic. Dante Moretti was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not anger anymore, something else. Something that made my skin prickle with awareness. "You sign," he said finally. Not a question. An observation laden with something I couldn't identify. "Yes." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm a teacher of the deaf. It's literally my job." "He told you all of that?" Dante's eyes flickered to Marco. "Just now? With his hands?" The question revealed so much about his relationship with his son that I had to resist the urge to say something I'd regret. Instead, I nodded. "Yes, sign language is a complete language, Mr. Moretti. Marco can express complex thoughts, emotions, experiences, everything a hearing child can express verbally. He just needs someone willing to learn how to listen." The barb hit its mark. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Dante's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Principal Hutchins, he said, his voice returning to that deadly quiet tone. I expect a full investigation into this incident by tomorrow morning. I want to know why my son was injured, why it wasn't reported immediately, and what steps you're taking to ensure it never happens again. He paused. And I want Miss Bennett to be my point of contact going forward for anything related to Marco. Principal Hutchins looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Dante's expression or perhaps his reputation made her simply nod. Of course, Mr. Moretti. Whatever you need. Dante's attention returned to me. I'd like to speak with you privately, Miss Bennett, about my son. It wasn't a request. I glanced at the clock on the wall. Dismissal is in 5 minutes. I need to be in my classroom. Then I'll walk with you. He turned to Marco, and I watched him struggle for a moment, clearly uncertain how to communicate with his own child. Finally, he simply placed his hand gently on Marco's shoulder, the first physical affection I'd seen him show the boy, and said, "Go with Miss Bennett. I'll meet you at the car." Marco's face lit up at the touch, at the attention, even as he couldn't hear the words. It broke my heart all over again. I held out my hand to Marco, who grabbed it immediately, his small fingers gripping mine tightly. Together, we left the conference room, Dante Moretti following close behind. The walk back to my classroom was silent, except for the muffled sounds of other classes dismissing. Children's voices echoing through the hallways, lockers slamming. Marco stayed pressed against my side, his free hand occasionally moving in small signs scared, tired, want to go home. When we reached my classroom, the other 5 students were already lined up with their backpacks, Rebecca checking each one to make sure they had their take-home folders and lunchboxes. Marco immediately went to collect his things, and I turned to face Dante Moretti. Up close, in the better lighting of the hallway, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way his expensive suit couldn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. He looked exhausted beneath the anger, worn down by something more than just this incident. "You wanted to speak with me?" I prompted, keeping my voice neutral. Dante glanced through the classroom window at Marco, who was carefully zipping his backpack with the meticulous focus he brought to every task. "Teach me," he said abruptly. I blinked. "I'm sorry?" Sign language. His dark eyes met mine, and there was something raw in them now, something that looked almost like desperation. "Teach me how to talk to my son. Of all the things I'd expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. Mr. Moretti, Dante," he corrected. "And before you say no, I'll pay whatever rate you want. I'll work around your schedule." He broke off, his jaw working as if the words were physically difficult to force out. I need to be able to communicate with him. Today made that clear. I studied him for a long moment, weighing my options. Everything I'd heard about Dante Moretti suggested he was dangerous, ruthless, someone to avoid. But standing here, watching him struggle with the simple desire to connect with his son, he didn't look dangerous. He looked like a father who'd realized too late that he was losing his child. "Why now?" I asked quietly. "Marco's been deaf his entire life. Why are you suddenly interested in learning to sign?" The question was blunt, probably rude, but I needed to know. I needed to know if this was genuine or if it was just a guilty impulse that would fade once the immediacy of today's incident wore off. Dante's expression hardened, but not with anger, with something that looked like self-recrimination. "Because I'm a fool," he said simply. "Because his mother convinced me that he needed to learn to speak, to lip-read, to fit into the hearing world. That signing would make him different, would isolate him further. Because I believed her until she left. And then I was lost. And by the time I realized I needed to learn, I didn't know where to start." The honesty surprised me. "And now? Now I've watched my son get hurt and not be able to tell anyone because the adults around him don't understand his language." His voice was rough. "Now I've watched him cry and not been able to comfort him because I don't know how to say I'm sorry or I love you or you're safe in the only language that matters to him. Now I'm asking for help because I'm out of options and time." The words hung between us, raw and unvarnished. "Mr. Moretti, Dante, learning sign language isn't a quick fix," I said carefully. "It's a commitment. It takes time, practice, patience. Most people give up after a few weeks when they realize how much work it actually is. I don't give up." The words were delivered with absolute certainty. "Not on things that matter, and my son matters. I believed him. Against my better judgment, against every warning bell going off in my head about getting personally involved with a parent, especially this parent, I believed him. "All right," I said finally. "I'll teach you. 2 evenings a week, 1 hour per session. I charge $50 an hour for private tutoring. I'll pay you $500 per hour." "No." My response was immediate and sharp. $50. That's my rate for all parents. I won't make exceptions. Dante looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have told him it was non-negotiable. "Fine. When can we start?" "Tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock. We can meet here at the school, use my classroom." He nodded once, then pulled out his phone. "Give me your number, in case I need to contact you about Marco." I hesitated, then rattled off my number. Dante typed it in, and a moment later my phone buzzed in my pocket with a text. "This is Dante Moretti. See you tomorrow at 6. Classroom is emptying out," I noted, glancing through the window at Rebecca shepherding the children toward the door. "Marco will be looking for you." Dante's expression softened almost imperceptibly at the mention of his son. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for standing up for him today. He trailed off, seeming to struggle for words. "For seeing him. Really seeing him. Not many people do." Before I could respond, he turned and walked into my classroom. I watched through the window as he approached Marco, as Marco's face transformed with joy at seeing his father, watched as Dante crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with the boy, and carefully, clumsily, formed a single sign: home. It was rough, the handshape not quite right, but Marco understood. His small hands flew in enthusiastic response, signs tumbling out faster than Dante could possibly follow. But Dante didn't look away, didn't get frustrated. He simply watched his son's hands, his expression intent, as if he could force understanding through sheer will alone. Rebecca came to stand beside me in the hallway. "That's Dante Moretti," she whispered, her voice tinged with something between awe and fear. "Do you know who he is?" "What he is?" "I know the rumors," I replied quietly, not taking my eyes off the father and son. "But right now, he's just a dad trying to connect with his son. That's all that matters." Rebecca made a skeptical sound. "Sophia, be careful. Men like that are still human," I interrupted gently. "And Marco deserves a father who can communicate with him. If teaching Dante sign language helps that happen, then it's worth it." I hoped I was right. The next evening, I arrived at my classroom at 5:45, my arms loaded with sign language textbooks, flashcards, and the curriculum materials I used for parent workshops. The school was quiet, most of the staff having left by 4:30, leaving only the security guard making his rounds and the cleaning crew working their way through the building. I flipped on the lights, the fluorescent bulbs flickering to life and illuminating the cheerful chaos of my classroom. Student artwork covered the walls, handprint turkeys left over from Thanksgiving, winter scenes painted in tempera, a timeline of American Sign Language history that my 4th graders had created. The alphabet in both print and fingerspelling stretched across the top of the whiteboard. Everything about this space was designed to celebrate deaf culture, to tell my students that their language was valuable, beautiful, worthy of pride. I wondered what Dante Moretti would think of it. At precisely 6 o'clock, I heard footsteps in the hallway, not the casual gait of someone comfortable in a school environment, but the measured, purposeful stride of someone always aware of their surroundings. The footsteps stopped outside my door, followed by a brief pause, then a knock. "Come in," I called, standing from where I'd been organizing materials on one of the student desks. Dante entered, and I was struck again by how he seemed to fill whatever space he occupied. He'd changed from the suit he'd worn yesterday. This one was navy blue, equally expensive, paired with a crisp white shirt open at the collar. No tie. The 2 men who'd flanked him at the parent-teacher conference were notably absent, though I had no doubt they were somewhere nearby. "Miss Bennett," he greeted, his dark eyes scanning the classroom with obvious interest. They lingered on the ASL alphabet chart, the deaf culture posters, the bookshelf filled with children's books in both English and ASL glosses. "Sophia," I corrected, gesturing to one of the adult-sized chairs I'd pulled up to a table. "If I'm going to call you Dante, we should probably drop the formalities. Have a seat." He moved to the chair but didn't sit immediately, still studying the room. "This is different from the other classrooms I've seen here." "Different how?" "More." He searched for the word. "Alive. Personal. Like someone actually cares about what happens here." The observation surprised me with its perception. I do care. These kids are incredible, and most of the world doesn't see that because they're too focused on what my students can't do instead of what they can. Dante's gaze returned to me, sharp and assessing. Is that what you think I do? Focus on what Marco can't do? I could have softened it, could have been diplomatic. Instead, I met his eyes and said honestly, yes. I think you're so worried about him being deaf that you can't see all the ways he's extraordinary despite it. Or maybe because of it. For a moment, tension crackled between us. Then, unexpectedly, Dante's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile but was close. You don't pull your punches, do you? Not when it comes to my students, or their parents' misconceptions about deafness. I pulled out my own chair and sat. Now, before we start, I need to understand where you're coming from. What do you already know about sign language? About deaf culture? Dante finally sat, his long legs barely fitting under the student table. He looked absurdly out of place. This powerful man folded into furniture designed for children, surrounded by colorful posters and alphabet charts. I know nothing, he admitted. Marco's mother insisted on an oral approach speech therapy, lip reading. She said sign language would make him lazy, would prevent him from developing speech. By the time I realized she was wrong, she was gone, and I didn't know where to start. Marco's mother left because he's deaf? I couldn't keep the judgment from my voice. Among other reasons. Dante's expression went carefully. Blank. She wanted a perfect child. Marco didn't fit that image. The casual way he said it, as if it were a simple fact rather than a devastating betrayal, made my chest tight. Her loss, I said firmly. Marco is perfect exactly as he is. Something flickered in Dante's eyes, surprise, maybe, or gratitude. You really believe that? I know that. I've been teaching deaf students for 6 years, and I've yet to meet a child who wasn't capable of remarkable things when given the right tools and support. I pulled out one of the textbooks, opening it to the first chapter. Which brings us to why we're here. Sign language isn't just a tool for communication. It's a complete language with its own grammar, syntax, and cultural context. Learning to sign means learning to think differently, to communicate visually rather than auditorily. Dante leaned forward, his attention focused entirely on me. It was intense, that focus like being pinned under a spotlight. Teach me, he said, simply. So I did. We started with the basics. The manual alphabet, common greetings, simple vocabulary that would allow him to have rudimentary conversations with Marco. I demonstrated each sign, had him mirror my movements, corrected his hand shapes when they weren't quite right. He was a surprisingly dedicated student. His hands were large, built for different work than forming delicate signs, but he approached each new word with the same intense concentration I'd seen Marco exhibit. When he couldn't get a sign right, he didn't get frustrated. He simply asked me to show him again, then practiced until his muscle memory caught on. The key is not just memorizing signs, I explained as we worked through basic family vocabulary. It's understanding that ASL has its own grammatical structure. Word order is different from English. Facial expressions aren't just emotion, they're grammatical markers. Eyebrow position can change a statement into a question. Dante attempted the sign for father, his hand shape slightly off. I reached out without thinking, gently adjusting his thumb placement, and felt him go still under my touch. Like this, I said, demonstrating again. 5 hand shape at your forehead, thumb touching, then move it away slightly. He repeated the sign, this time correctly, his eyes never leaving mine. How long before I can have a real conversation with him? That depends on how much you practice. Basic communication? Maybe 3 months. Fluent conversation? 2 to 3 years of consistent study and practice. Dante's jaw tightened. That's too long. Language learning takes time, I said gently. But even basic signs will mean the world to Marco. Being able to tell him I love you or I'm proud of you or good job, those simple phrases will matter more than fluent grammar. Teach me those. Now. It was a command, but there was something almost desperate underlying it. So I did. I showed him how to sign I love you, the simple gesture that combined the letters I, L, and Y. How to sign proud, the A hand shape moving up the chest. How to sign good job, the thumbs up. Enthusiastic and clear. Dante practiced each one until they were flawless, his expression intent. What else? What else does he need to hear? You're safe, I signed, demonstrating. I'm here. I won't leave. Those are probably the most important things you can tell a child who's experienced abandonment. The words hung heavy between us, the unspoken context of Marco's mother's departure filling the space. Dante's hands moved through the signs, his movements becoming more confident with each repetition. We worked for the full hour, moving through basic vocabulary and simple sentence structures. Dante absorbed everything with remarkable speed, asking intelligent questions, making connections between signs, occasionally surprising me with his insights. Why does the sign for mother start here? He touched his chin. And the sign for father start here? He touched his forehead. Good question. It's part of a pattern in ASL. Signs for male family members tend to be made near or on the forehead. Signs for female family members tend to be near or on the chin. Once you know that pattern, it's easier to remember new family vocabulary. Dante nodded, clearly filing that information away. And the sign for son? I showed him the male sign near the forehead, then the baby holding gesture, and this is daughter. The female sign near the chin, then the same baby holding gesture. He practiced both, though his attention clearly lingered on son. After a moment, he signed, my son, the possessive pronoun clear in his movements. Perfect, I said, meaning it. You're a fast learner. I'm motivated. His dark eyes met mine. How do I tell him what happened yesterday was wrong? That I'm sorry he was hurt? I walked him through it. Yesterday, bad. Someone hurt you. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. I'll keep you safe. Dante's expression was fierce as he practiced the sequence. The boy who hurt him, Ethan Morrison. What's being done about it? That's not really something I can discuss, I said carefully. Student discipline is handled by the administration. That's not what I asked. His voice dropped to that deadly quiet tone I'd heard yesterday. I asked what's being done. I hesitated, torn between professional ethics and the genuine concern in his question. Ethan has been suspended for 3 days. His parents were called in for a conference. Principal Hutchins is implementing new recess supervision protocols to ensure signing adults are present. Not good enough. It's what the school can do, I said firmly. Dante, I understand you're angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover it. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the linoleum floor. Some child puts his hands on my son, hurts him, mocks him for trying to speak, and he gets 3 days at home? That's justice? That's the school system. I stood as well, maintaining eye contact even though he towered over me. I don't like it either. But escalating this, making threats, using your influence to what? Dante's expression was dangerous now. To protect my son? To make sure every child in this school knows that Marco Moretti is not to be touched? To scare 6-year-olds into compliance through fear rather than teaching them why inclusion and kindness matter? I kept my voice level. Marco doesn't need his classmates to be afraid of him or his family. He needs them to see him as a friend, as an equal. Fear doesn't accomplish that. Fear keeps him safe. No, I countered. Understanding keeps him safe. Education keeps him safe. Teaching hearing children about deaf culture, about different ways of communicating, about empathy that keeps him safe. Not your reputation. We stared at each other across the small space between us, the tension thick enough to cut. I knew I was overstepping. Knew that challenging. Dante Moretti like this was probably foolish, but I meant every word. Finally, Dante exhaled slowly, some of the dangerous edge leaving his expression. You're either very brave or very stupid, speaking to me like that. I'm a teacher standing up for my student, I replied. That's all. That's not all. His gaze held mine. But we'll leave it at that for now. He glanced at his watch. It's past 7. I should let you get home. I blinked, surprised to see he was right. The hour had flown by faster than I'd expected. Same time Thursday? Yes. And Sophia? He paused at the door. Thank you. For this. For yesterday. For seeing Marco as more than just a disability. He's not a disability, I said quietly. He's a little boy who happens to be deaf. There's a difference. Dante nodded slowly, something unreadable crossing his face. I'm beginning to understand that. After he left, I sat alone in my classroom for several minutes, processing what had just happened. Teaching. Dante's sign language felt significant in a way I couldn't quite articulate, like I'd just stepped onto a path I couldn't see the end of. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Is it normal to feel like your hands are cramping after practicing signs for an hour? Despite myself, I smiled. I typed back. Very normal. It means you're using muscles you don't usually engage. The cramping will decrease as you practice more. The response came quickly. Good. Because I plan to practice a lot. Another text followed. Marco asked me to sign with him before bed tonight. I managed, "I love you and good night." His face lit up like I'd given him the world. My throat tightened reading that. I typed, "You did give him the world. You gave him connection. Keep going." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "I will. Thank you, Sophia." I looked at that text for a long moment before responding simply, "Anytime." The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Dante came to my classroom every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock, and for 1 hour, we worked on expanding his sign language vocabulary and understanding of ASL grammar. He approached learning with the same intensity he apparently brought to everything else in his life, focused, determined, refusing to accept anything less than mastery. But what surprised me more than his dedication to learning was the way he changed around Marco. I saw it during morning drop-off, which Dante started doing himself rather than sending his driver. He would walk Marco to my classroom, and instead of the awkward, stilted interactions I'd witnessed before, there was actual communication. Basic. Yes, Dante's signing was still elementary but real. "Good morning," Dante would sign to his son. "Good morning, Papa," Marco would sign back, his small face glowing. "Have fun. Learn lots. I'll see you later. I love you." That last sign never failed to make my heart squeeze, because Marco would throw himself into his father's arms after signing it, and Dante would hold him like he was the most precious thing in the world, his large hand cradling the back of Marco's dark head. "He's getting so much more confident," Rebecca observed one morning after witnessing one of these exchanges. "Marco, I mean. He's participating more in class, signing with the other kids more, smiling more. Whatever you're doing with his father, it's working." I watched through the classroom window as Dante crouched to fix Marco's collar, signing something that made the boy giggle. All I'm doing is teaching Dante to communicate with his son. The rest is them building a relationship. "It's more than that," Rebecca insisted. "You're giving them both something they needed. Connection. Understanding." She paused. "Also, have you noticed Dante Moretti is ridiculously attractive when he smiles? Because I have. And so have half the mothers at this school." I had noticed. It was impossible not to. But I kept that observation to myself. During our tutoring sessions, I learned things about Dante that surprised me. That he'd taken over his family's business, he never specified what exactly that entailed when his own father died unexpectedly 3 years ago. That he felt like he was constantly failing at it, never living up to his father's legacy. That Marco's mother, Vanessa, had been his college girlfriend, the perfect choice according to his family, right up until she wasn't. She left the day after Marco's diagnosis was confirmed, Dante told me one evening, his hands absently practicing the sign for mother over and over. He was 14 months old. We'd suspected something was wrong. He wasn't responding to sounds, wasn't developing speech. The audiologist did the testing, confirmed profound bilateral hearing loss, and Vanessa looked at me and said, "I can't do this. I didn't sign up for a broken child." "Marco isn't broken," I said fiercely. "I know that now." Dante's expression was tight. But back then, I didn't know anything. I was terrified. I had a business to run, a son I didn't know how to help, and a partner who walked out without looking back. Vanessa's family is connected powerful. They made it clear that if I pursued custody challenges or tried to hold her accountable, there would be consequences. So I let her go, and I raised Marco alone. "You're doing better than you think," I said quietly. "Am I?" His dark eyes found mine. "Because most days I feel like I'm drowning, Sophia. Like I'm failing him in 1,000 small ways. The fact that you worry about failing him means you're not failing him. Bad parents don't lose sleep over whether they're doing enough." Something in his expression softened. "How did you become so wise about parenting? Do you have children?" "No, but I have a younger brother, Danny, who's deaf. I watched my parents navigate a lot of what you're dealing with, the uncertainty, the fear, the steep learning curve." I paused, debating how much to share. Danny was born hearing, but he lost it at age 4 due to meningitis. My parents had to completely reimagine how to connect with him, how to support him. It wasn't easy. "Is that why you became a teacher of the deaf?" I nodded. Danny is the reason for everything I do in this field. He's 22 now, studying engineering at Gallaudet University. He's brilliant, funny, stubborn, everything a younger brother should be. And he never would have gotten where he is without people who believed in him, who saw his potential instead of his limitations. "I'd like to meet him someday," Dante said. "If you'd be willing to introduce us." The request surprised me. "Why?" Because I want Marco to see successful deaf adults, to know that his future is unlimited, and because. Dante hesitated. Because you matter to him. He talks about you constantly, well, signs about you constantly. Miss Sophia this, Miss Sophia that. If your brother is important to you, then I'd like to know. Him. You matter to him. The words settled warm in my chest. I'll ask Danny, I said. He'd probably love to meet Marco. He volunteers with deaf youth programs. I'm sure he'd be happy to connect with you both. Our eyes held for a moment too long, something unspoken passing between us. Then Dante looked away, his jaw tight. We should get back to the lesson. So we did, but the atmosphere had shifted somehow, become more charged. It was late March when everything changed. I was cleaning up my classroom after school when my phone rang. Principal Hutchins, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Sophia, I need you to come to my office immediately. There's been an incident involving Marco. My blood ran cold. I dropped the papers I'd been organizing and ran. Marco was in Principal Hutchins's office, sitting on the small sofa reserved for students who were ill or upset. His face was streaked with tears, his small body shaking, and the moment he saw me, he launched himself into my arms, signing frantically. Scared, scared, scared. Man grabbed me. Scary wanted to take me. Papa, Papa, where's Papa? Marco, slow down. I signed, my own hands trembling as I held him. You're safe. I'm here. Tell me what happened. Slowly, through broken signs and hitching sobs, Marco told me. A man had approached him during after-school pickup. A stranger. The man had known Marco's name, had tried to take his hand, had told him Marco had read his lips enough to understand, that his father had sent him to bring Marco home. Marco, terrified, had run back into the school, straight to the nearest adult he could find. Where is Dante? I demanded, looking at Principal Hutchins. We called him immediately. He's on his way. She broke off as the office door slammed open. Dante Moretti stood in the doorway, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw the man everyone warned me about. His expression was absolutely murderous, his entire body vibrating with barely leashed violence. The two men who'd accompanied him looked equally dangerous, hands moving inside their jackets in ways that suggested weapons. But the moment Dante saw Marco in my arms, his face transformed. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees in front of us, his hands moving in urgent signs. Are you hurt? Did anyone touch you? Are you okay? Marco practically threw himself at his father, and Dante caught him, wrapping his son in a protective embrace that looked like it could shield him from the entire world. What the hell happened? Dante's voice was deadly quiet as he looked at Principal Hutchins. How did someone get close enough to my son to try to take him? We're still investigating. The word was a roar. Someone tried to kidnap my son on school property, and you're investigating? Marco flinched at the volume, and immediately Dante's expression softened. His hands moved in gentle signs. I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at the people who didn't protect you. You did everything right. I'm so proud of you. Mr. Moretti, I assure you we take this incredibly seriously, Principal Hutchins said, her voice shaking slightly. We've already called the police. We're reviewing security footage. This is my fault. I heard myself say the words before I'd consciously decided to speak. Everyone turned to look at me. I told Marco at the beginning of the year to always find an adult if he felt unsafe, to trust his instincts. He did exactly what I taught him. This isn't his fault, and it's not the school's fault. This is. I trailed off, not sure how to finish. This is my fault, Dante said quietly. His eyes met mine over Marco's head, and the self-recrimination in them was devastating. Someone knew Marco is my weakness. Someone tried to use him against me. The implications of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Dante, I said carefully, what does that mean? He didn't answer immediately, just held Marco tighter. When he finally spoke, his voice was resigned. It means I have enemies. It means those enemies now know the best way to hurt me is through my son. It means Marco isn't safe at this school anymore. You're pulling him out? Principal Hutchins looked relieved and guilty in equal measure. I don't have a choice. Dante stood, Marco still clinging to him. Not until I can ensure his safety. Sophia, I need to talk to you, privately. Principal Hutchins started to protest, but something in Dante's expression silenced her. She simply nodded and left her own office, closing the door behind her. Dante set Marco down gently on the sofa, signing, Miss Sophia and I need to talk. Adult things. Can you sit here for a few minutes? I promise I'm not leaving. Marco nodded, though he kept one small hand fisted in Dante's suit jacket. Dante turned to face me, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. I need your help. What kind of help? Marco can't come to school right now. Not until I've dealt with. He gestured vaguely. The situation. But he needs to continue his education. He needs consistency, routine, someone he trusts. He paused. I'm asking you to be his private teacher. At my home. Full-time. At least temporarily. I'll triple your current salary, provide housing if you need it, ensure your safety. Dante, I have other students who have other teachers who can step in. Marco has you. Only you. He trusts you, Sophia. He feels safe with you. Dante's voice dropped. I trust you. And right now, that's a very short list. I looked at Marco, who was watching our conversation with anxious eyes, his small hands moving in the sign for please over and over. Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that getting more involved with Dante Moretti and his dangerous world was foolish at best, suicidal at worst, that I should decline politely, recommend another teacher, maintain professional boundaries. But then I thought about Marco sitting in that conference room, terrified and alone, reaching for me because I was his safe person. I thought about the way his face lit up when he understood a new concept, when he successfully signed a complicated story, when he felt seen and valued. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll do it. Dante's relief was palpable. Thank you. We'll work out the details, but I need you to start tomorrow. Is that possible? I'll need to request emergency leave from the school. Arrange for a substitute. Done. I'll handle it with Principal Hutchins. Dante pulled out his phone. Give me your address. I'll have someone pick you up at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Pack for at least 2 weeks. You'll be staying at my home for Marco's security and yours. Wait, staying at. Non-negotiable. His expression was firm. If you're going to be teaching Marco, you need to be where he is. And right now, the safest place is my home, where I have security measures in place. Besides, his expression softened slightly. Marco will do better with consistency. Having you there full-time will help him feel secure. I wanted to argue. Wanted to maintain some semblance of professional boundaries. But the logic was sound, and Marco's well-being was the priority. Fine, I agreed. But we established ground rules. This is a professional arrangement, temporary, with clear boundaries and expectations in writing. Agreed. My lawyer will draw up a contract tonight. You'll have it to review before you sign anything. Dante held out his hand. Do we have a deal? I looked at his extended hand, then at Marco, who was watching us hopefully. I placed my hand in Dante's. Deal. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong. Thank you, Sophia. You have no idea what this means. But as I looked into his dark eyes, felt the electricity of his touch, saw the raw gratitude in his expression, I had a feeling I was about to find out, and I had a feeling my life was about to get infinitely more complicated. The car that picked me up at 7 a.m. was not what I'd expected. I'd imagined something ostentatious, a limousine perhaps, or a luxury sedan that screamed wealth and power. Instead, it was a black SUV with tinted windows, practical and understated, with a serious-looking man named Vincent at the wheel, who introduced himself as head of Mr. Moretti's security detail. Miss Bennett, he greeted with a nod, taking my 2 suitcases I'd packed for 3 weeks despite Dante's estimate of 2 and placing them carefully in the back. The drive will take about 30 minutes. Mr. Moretti asked me to inform you that breakfast will be ready when we arrive. I slid into the back seat, my stomach a knot of nerves and anticipation. What was I doing? I'd agreed to move into Dante Moretti's home, to become fully immersed in his world, all under the guise of teaching his son. It was professional. It was temporary. It was absolutely the right thing to do for Marco's sake. I repeated these assurances to myself as Vincent navigated through Chicago's morning traffic, heading north toward the affluent neighborhoods along Lake Michigan. The further we drove from my modest apartment on the south side, the more I felt like I was crossing into another world entirely. When we finally pulled through a gated entrance, Vincent entering a code that opened massive iron gates, topped with subtle but sophisticated security cameras, my breath caught. Dante's home wasn't a house. It was an estate. The main building was a stunning blend of modern architecture and classical Italian design, all clean lines and warm stone, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Lake Michigan. The grounds were immaculate despite the early spring weather, with mature trees providing privacy and carefully maintained gardens that would probably be spectacular in a few months. "Welcome to the Moretti residence," Vincent said, pulling up to the front entrance. "Mr. Moretti is in the breakfast room with Marco. I'll take your bags to your suite." My suite. Of course, I had a suite. Before I could fully process any of this, the front door opened and Marco came running out, his face lit up with pure joy. He launched himself at me the moment I stepped out of the car, his small arms wrapping around my waist, his hands already moving in rapid signs. You came. I was worried you wouldn't come. Papa said you would, but I was still worried. Are you really going to stay here and teach me?" I laughed, catching his hands to slow down the torrent of signs. "I'm really here. I really came. I'm really going to teach you. I promised, didn't I?" "You did." Marco's smile was incandescent. "Come see my room, and the library. And Papa got you your own classroom. A real classroom just for us." "Let her breathe, Marco." Dante's voice was warm with amusement as he appeared in the doorway. He was dressed more casually than I'd ever seen him, dark jeans, a charcoal Henley that emphasized his broad shoulders, his hair slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered. He looked younger like this, more approachable, though no less commanding. "Good morning, Sophia." "Good morning." I was acutely aware of Marco still clinging to my waist, of Vincent discreetly carrying my luggage inside, of the way the morning sun caught in Dante's dark hair. "This is quite a place you have here. It's home." Dante descended the steps, and I caught a flash of something in his expression, pride maybe, or nervousness about my reaction. "Come inside. I'll show you around after breakfast. Marco hasn't stopped talking about you since he woke up." "I missed you," Marco signed, looking up at me with those expressive dark eyes. "School isn't the same without you." "I missed you too," I signed back, ruffling his hair. "But now we get to work together every day. Won't that be fun?" Marco nodded enthusiastically and grabbed my hand, practically dragging me toward the front door. Dante followed, and I felt his presence behind me like a physical warmth. The interior of the house was even more impressive than the exterior. The foyer opened into a spacious living area with soaring ceilings, original artwork on the walls, and furniture that managed to look both expensive and comfortable. Everything was done in warm neutrals, creams, taupes, deep browns with touches of Italian elegance in the light fixtures and architectural details. But what caught my attention most were the small touches clearly meant for Marco. A basket of toys in the corner of the living room, children's books scattered on the coffee table, family photographs displayed at a height where a child could see them. This wasn't just a showpiece property. This was a home where a little boy lived and played and was loved. Marco led me through to the breakfast room, a sun-filled space overlooking the lake, where a table was set for 3. The food spread out looked like something from a restaurant: fresh fruit, pastries, eggs prepared multiple ways, juice and coffee. "I wasn't sure what you liked," Dante said, pulling out a chair for me. "So I had Teresa make a variety. She's my housekeeper and cook. You'll meet her soon. She's been with my family for 20 years. I sat, overwhelmed by the casual luxury of it all. "This is too much. It's breakfast." Dante took the seat across from me while Marco bounced into the chair beside mine. "And you're a guest in my home. Actually, more than a guest, you're here to help my son. The least I can do is feed you properly." Marco was already piling food onto his plate with the single-minded focus of a hungry 6-year-old. I helped myself to fruit and a croissant, hyper-aware of Dante's gaze tracking my movements. "So," I said, breaking the silence that was becoming charged, "you mentioned you set up a classroom?" Dante's expression brightened, actually brightened, like I'd asked the exact right question. "Yes, I converted one of the unused rooms on the 2nd floor. I had Teresa order supplies based on what you have in your classroom at Ashford, plus anything else we thought might be useful. If something's missing, just let me know and I'll have it delivered today." The thoughtfulness of that gesture caught me off guard. "You didn't have to do all this." "Yes, I did." Dante's voice was firm. "Marco's education is priority. If I'm asking you to uproot your life to teach him here, the least I can do is provide you with everything you need to do that effectively." "Papa worked really hard," Marco signed, his hands moving with enthusiasm between bites of scrambled eggs. "He stayed up late, getting everything ready for you." "Marco," Dante said, a hint of exasperation in his voice even as his hands moved in signs. "You weren't supposed to tell her that." "Why not?" Marco's expression was genuinely confused. "It's nice. Miss Sophia should know you care." I hid my smile behind my coffee cup, Watching Dante's cheeks actually flush felt slightly. It was humanizing, that small show of embarrassment, and it made something warm unfurl in my chest. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for going to so much trouble. I'm sure Marco will appreciate having a dedicated learning space." "It's not just for Marco." Dante met my eyes. "I thought you might appreciate having a professional space that's separate from the rest of the house. Somewhere you can maintain boundaries between work and everything else." The consideration behind that statement struck me. He understood that blurring the lines between professional and personal could be complicated. He was trying to make this easier for me. "I appreciate that," I said honestly. "Speaking of boundaries, did your lawyer prepare that contract?" "It's in the classroom, ready for you to review and sign whenever you're comfortable. No pressure." Dante paused. "Though I should mention that I took the liberty of having a security briefing prepared for you as well. There are some protocols you'll need to follow while you're staying here, for your own safety. The reminder of why I was really here, why Marco couldn't go to school, why I was living in a fortress with security details sent a chill through me. Have there been any more incidents since yesterday?" Dante's expression shuddered. "Nothing direct, but I'm taking precautions. Which brings me to something we need to discuss." He glanced at Marco, who was focused on his breakfast, then back to me. "Later, after I show you the classroom and your room." The weight in his voice told me this conversation would be significant. I nodded, returning my attention to my breakfast, though my appetite had diminished considerably. After we ate, Marco gave me an enthusiastic tour of the house, or at least the parts he was most excited about. His bedroom was a perfect blend of child-friendly and sophisticated, with a navy and white color scheme, a reading nook by the window, and shelves full of toys and books. What caught my attention, though, was the collection of family photos on his dresser, Dante and Marco, at various ages. Marco as a baby, as a toddler, always with his father's arms around him, but notably absent any photos of Marco's mother. "Papa says pictures are memories." Marco signed as he noticed me looking. "He says we keep the good memories and let go of the bad ones." The wisdom in that statement, coming from a 6-year-old, made my throat tight. "Your papa is a smart man." Marco nodded seriously, then brightened. "Come see the library. It's my favorite room besides my room and now the classroom." The library was indeed stunning, a 2-story space with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a rolling ladder, comfortable seating areas, and a massive window overlooking the lake. But what made me stop in my tracks was the entire section dedicated to children's books, many of them with ASL glosses or about deaf culture. "I've been collecting them," Dante said quietly from behind me. He'd been following our tour, a slight smile on his face as he watched Marco's enthusiasm. "Whenever I find books that might help Marco see himself represented, I add them to the collection. Some are in Italian, some in English, all of them celebrating different abilities and perspectives." I turned to face him, genuinely moved. "Dante, this is incredible. Do you know how rare it is for deaf children to have access to literature that reflects their experiences?" He shook his head. "I'm learning. That's why I'm collecting them. I don't want Marco to grow up thinking being deaf makes him less than. I want him to see successful deaf adults, deaf heroes, deaf stories." "You're doing everything right," I said softly. "You know that, right? All the fears you have about failing him, you're not. You're giving him exactly what he needs." Dante's expression did something complicated, relief and doubt warring across his features. "I hope you're right. Can we show Miss Sophia the classroom?" "Now?" Marco signed, bouncing impatiently. "Please, please, please?" "All right," Dante agreed with that small smile. "Lead the way." The classroom on the 2nd floor made me stop dead in the doorway. It was perfect. Dante hadn't just replicated what I had at Ashford, he'd improved upon it. The room was spacious and filled with natural light from large windows. There was a small desk for Marco, a larger desk for me, a reading area with cushions and a bookshelf, whiteboards covering one wall, bulletin boards on another already decorated with ASL alphabet charts and deaf culture posters. Art supplies were organized in bins. Educational manipulatives filled shelves. There was even a small area set up with sensory toys and fidgets, recognizing that learning happened in different ways. On my desk sat a laptop, a stack of curriculum guides, and a leather folder that I assumed contained the contract. "If anything is missing or wrong, we can change it," Dante said, and there was actual date and nervousness in his voice now. I had Teresa research what elementary classrooms typically have, and I added things I thought Marco might enjoy, but I'm not an educator. "I don't know if this is, it's perfect," I interrupted, my voice slightly choked. Dante, this is absolutely perfect. I can't believe you put all this together in one night. I had help. He moved into the room, running his hand along the back of Marco's chair. And I was motivated. I needed to feel like I was doing something useful after yesterday. Something to protect him. Even if it's just creating a space where he can learn and be safe. The vulnerability in that admission made my chest ache. I watched Marco immediately go to the reading area, pulling out books and arranging them just so, completely at ease in this space created specifically for him. He feels safe here, I observed. You did that. You gave him that. Dante's eyes met mine, and the intensity in them made my breath catch. You gave him that, by making him feel seen at Ashford, by standing up for him, by treating him like he matters. I'm just trying to build on what you started. We stood there, the air between us charged with something I didn't want to name, until Marco bounded over with a book about a deaf superhero. Can we read this first, please? I smiled, grateful for the interruption. Of course. Why don't you get settled in the reading area, and we'll start our first lesson. Marco scrambled to comply, and I turned to Dante. You wanted to talk about something? The security protocols? His expression sobered immediately. Yes, but let me show you to your room first. Give you a chance to settle in before we have that conversation. My suite, because it really was a suite. Not just a room, was on the same floor as the classroom, just down the hall. It consisted of a spacious bedroom decorated in soft grays and whites, an attached bathroom that was bigger than my entire apartment bathroom, a sitting area with a desk and comfortable chairs, and a walk-in closet that made me laugh at its absurd size given my limited wardrobe. Teresa unpacked your things already, Dante said, leaning against the doorframe as I explored. If you need anything, toiletries, clothes, anything at all, just make a list and it will be handled. This is too much, I said for what felt like the 100th time that morning. It's what I have available. Dante's voice was matter of fact. You're doing me an immense favor by being here, by teaching Marco, by helping keep him safe and stable during this situation. The least I can do is make sure you're comfortable. I turned to face him, studying his expression. What situation exactly? You keep referencing it, but you haven't actually told me what's going on. Who tried to take Marco? Why? Dante's jaw tightened. That's the conversation we need to have. Are you settled enough to talk now, or do you need more time? Now is fine. I moved to sit in one of the chairs, gesturing for him to take the other. I think I need to understand what I've walked into. He sat, and for a moment he just looked at me, as if weighing how much to reveal. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture I was beginning to recognize as a tell of stress. My family has been in Chicago for 4 generations, he began. My great-grandfather came from Sicily with nothing but ambition and a willingness to do whatever it took to survive. He built a legitimate business construction, initially, but he also made certain arrangements with people in positions of power, protection, favors, information. By the time my grandfather took over, the Moretti family was influential in ways that extended beyond legitimate business. You're talking about the Mafia, I said quietly. I'm talking about my family. Dante met my eyes steadily. Yes, we have connections to organizations that operate in gray and sometimes black areas of the law. Yes, my family has historically been involved in activities that would be considered criminal if anyone could prove them. But I'm not my grandfather, Sophia, and I'm not my father. What does that mean? It means that when I inherited leadership 3 years ago, I started making changes, moving us toward legitimate enterprises, cutting ties with the more problematic aspects of our operations, refusing deals that involved drugs, human trafficking, exploitation. I'm trying to transform what the Moretti name means, trying to build something Marco can be proud of, instead of something he needs to hide from. He leaned forward, his expression intense. But change like that makes enemies. People who benefited from the old ways, who see my reforms as weakness. Rival families who think a shift toward legitimacy is an opportunity to encroach on territory we've held for decades. And my father's old associates who believe I'm betraying his legacy. Understanding began to dawn. And someone from one of those groups tried to take Marco. Yes, the word was heavy with guilt. I've been receiving threats for months. Anonymous messages warning me that there would be consequences if I continued on this path. I ignored them. I thought I had adequate security, that I could handle whatever came. I never thought. His voice broke slightly. I never thought they would target Marco. He's 6 years old, Sophia. An innocent child. and someone looked at him and saw leverage. The anguish in his voice was raw and real. Without thinking, I reached across the space between us and placed my hand over his. They didn't get him. Marco is safe. You protected him. Barely. Dante's hand turned, his fingers threading through mine. If he hadn't been as smart as he is, if he hadn't run back into the school, if he hadn't found an adult in time, he broke off, unable to finish the thought. But he did, because you taught him to trust his instincts, because I taught him to find help when he felt unsafe, because he's a brave, intelligent boy who did exactly what he was supposed to do. I squeezed his hand. You can't focus on the what-ifs. You can only focus on what happens next. What happens next is I eliminate the threat. The words were delivered with absolute conviction. I find out who ordered the attempt on Marco, and I make sure they never threaten my son again. The coldness in his voice sent a shiver through me. This was the other side of Dante Moretti, the dangerous one, the one capable of violence, the one who made people afraid. How? I asked, not sure I wanted to know the answer. That's not something you need to worry about. Dante's expression softened slightly as he looked at our joined hands. Your job is to keep Marco's education and emotional well-being on track, to provide him with stability and normalcy, while I handle the less pleasant aspects of this situation. That's why I need you here, Sophia. Not just as a teacher, but as someone who can give him a sense of safety when everything else feels uncertain. And the security protocols? Vincent will go over them with you in detail, but the basics. You don't leave the property without security escort. You don't share information about where you are or who you're with on social media or with anyone outside this house. You report anything unusual immediately. And, he hesitated, you keep Marco in your sight at all times when I'm not with him. No exceptions. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. What if I can't do this? What if I'm not equipped to? You are. Dante's free hand came up to cup my cheek, the touch gentle and unexpectedly intimate. You're the only person outside of my security team that I trust with my son's life right now. The only person Marco trusts completely. If you can't do this, then no one can. His dark eyes held mine, and I was suddenly acutely aware of how close we were, of his hand on my face, of our fingers still intertwined, of the way my heart had started racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Okay, I whispered. I'll do it. Thank you. The words were barely audible. Dante's thumb traced along my cheekbone, and for a moment I thought Miss Sophia. Marco's voice-equivalent stomping feet in the hallway broke the moment. Dante pulled back immediately, his expression shifting back to something more controlled, though his eyes remained warm. Marco appeared in the doorway, signing urgently. I'm bored. Can we start lessons now, please? I laughed, grateful for the interruption and the return to normal. Yes, we can start lessons. Let me just review the contract first, then I'm all yours. Marco cheered silently and raced back toward the classroom. I stood, and Dante stood with me, his expression slightly rueful. I should let you work, he said. I have some calls to make anyway. I'll be in my office if you need anything. It's on the first floor. Last. Door on the left. And Sophia? He paused at the door. Thank you. For everything. For being here, for understanding, for giving Marco what I can't. You give him plenty, I replied. You give him love. Everything else we can figure out together. The smile he gave me was small but genuine. Together. I liked the sound of that. After he left, I sank back into the chair, my heart still racing. I was in dangerous territory, and not just because of whoever was threatening the Moretti family. I was in danger of developing feelings for Dante Moretti, feelings that went beyond professional concern, beyond sympathy for a struggling father, feelings that could complicate everything. But as I picked up the contract and began reading through its surprisingly fair terms, generous salary, clear boundaries, emphasis on Marco's well-being above all else, I couldn't bring myself to regret my decision to be here. Marco needed me, and increasingly, I was beginning to think Dante did too. The question was, what did I need? The next 3 weeks fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings belonged to structured lessons. Marco and I worked through math, reading, science, art, all adapted for his learning style, all incorporating sign language and visual learning strategies. He was a bright student, curious and eager, and without the distractions of a larger classroom, he flourished. Afternoons were more flexible. We'd read together in the library, practice his speech with the therapist who came twice a week, work on art projects, or sometimes just play. Marco loved board games, loved building elaborate structures with blocks, loved when I'd let him teach me things he'd learned. And Dante was always there, hovering at the edges. He'd join us for lunch, asking Marco about his morning lessons in increasingly confident sign language. He'd appear during afternoon playtime, somehow managing to look both powerful and slightly ridiculous as Marco convinced him to participate in elaborate pretend games. He'd read to Marco before bed every night, his signing still elementary but improving rapidly, his deep voice wrapping around Italian words as he told his son stories about their family history. I watched their relationship transform day by day. The awkwardness faded. The love that had always been there became more visible, more expressed, more mutual. Marco bloomed under his father's focused attention, becoming more confident, more expressive, more joyful, and I found myself getting drawn deeper into their world. Dante started joining our tutoring sessions not as a student, but as an observer, learning by watching how I taught Marco, asking questions about teaching strategies, about deaf education philosophy, about how to support his son's development. Our conversations during those sessions ranged from professional to personal, from discussions about Marco's progress to exchanges about our own childhoods, our hopes, our fears. I learned that Dante's mother had died when he was 12, leaving him to be raised by his father and grandfather, both of whom had very traditional ideas about what it meant to be a Moretti man. That he'd met Vanessa in college, had thought she was different from the women his family expected him to marry, had genuinely loved her, until the moment she'd revealed that her love was conditional on perfection. That he played piano beautifully. I discovered this by accident one evening when I'd heard music drifting from the living room and found him at the grand piano I'd barely noticed, his fingers moving over the keys with surprising grace. That he was trying, desperately, to be a better man than his legacy suggested he should be. And he learned things about me, about growing up with a deaf brother, about the financial struggles that had led me to teaching, instead of pursuing the deaf advocacy law degree I'd dreamed about my own complicated feelings about family and loyalty and sacrifice. We were becoming friends. I realized one evening as we sat in the library after Marco had gone to bed, drinking wine and discussing everything from deaf politics to Italian literature, real friends, despite the circumstances that had brought us together, or maybe something more than friends, if I was honest with myself about the way my heart rate increased when Dante entered a room, about the way his casual touches a hand on my shoulder, fingers brushing mine as he passed me, something sent electricity through me, about the way his eyes lingered on me sometimes, dark and intense and full of something I didn't dare name. But I couldn't think about that, couldn't let myself acknowledge the growing attraction between us. Because I was here for Marco, this was professional, temporary, and getting emotionally involved with Dante Moretti would be the height of foolishness. I repeated this to myself daily. It didn't make it any more true. It was the beginning of the 4th week when everything came to a crapper. I'd taken Marco outside to the extensive gardens for a nature lesson. We were studying plant biology, and the hands-on approach was perfect for his learning style. The weather had finally warmed enough to make outdoor activities pleasant, and Marco was delighted to be outside the house, even with Vincent maintaining a discreet but constant presence at the garden's perimeter. We were crouched by a flower bed, examining the first spring bulbs pushing through the soil, when Marco suddenly stiffened. His hands moved in rapid signs. Someone's here. I can feel the ground shaking. Cars. Lots of cars. I looked up, alarmed, just as Vincent's phone buzzed. His expression went hard as he answered, spoke briefly in Italian, then turned to me. Miss Bennett, take Marco inside. Now, quickly. The urgency in his voice sent my heart racing. I grabbed Marco's hand, signing, We need to go inside. Fast. It's okay, but we need to hurry. We ran toward the house, Vincent flanking us, his hand inside, in his jacket, in a way that told me he was gripping a weapon. The front door burst open and Dante appeared, his expression more dangerous than I'd ever seen it. Inside, he commanded. Sophia, take Marco to the safe room. 3rd floor, master bedroom, door behind the bookcase. Vincent will show you. Do not come out until I tell you it's safe. Dante, what's happening? Now, Sophia, please. His eyes met mine, and the fear in them was real. Please, keep him safe. I didn't argue. I swept Marco into my arms. He was getting heavy, but adrenaline gave me strength, and followed Vincent as he led us at a run through the house, up 2 flights of stairs, down a hallway to a massive bedroom I'd never entered before. Vincent moved to the bookcase, pressed something, and it swung open like a door in a movie, revealing a small room beyond. It was windowless but comfortable, with a couch, water bottles, a landline phone, and supplies. "Stay here," Vincent instructed. "Lock the door behind me. If Mr. Moretti doesn't come for you within 2 hours, call this number." He pressed a card into my hand. "They'll extract you safely." "What's happening?" My voice was shaking. "Who's here?" "Dante's handling it." Vincent's expression softened slightly. "He'll keep you safe. Both of you. I promise." Then he was gone, and I was alone with Marco in a hidden panic room, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. "What's wrong?" Marco signed, his small face pale and frightened. "Why are we hiding? Where's Papa?" "Papa is taking care of something," I signed, pulling him onto the couch and wrapping my arms around him. "We're safe here. This is just a precaution. Like a fire drill, remember? We practiced what to do in an emergency. This is like that." But it wasn't like that at all, and Marco knew it. He buried his face in my shoulder, and I felt his small body trembling. I held him close, straining to hear anything from beyond the hidden door, my mind racing with terrible possibilities. This was what I'd signed up for, keeping Marco safe during a crisis. But knowing that intellectually was different from experiencing the reality of it, the visceral fear, the helplessness. Time crawled by with agonizing slowness. Minutes felt like hours. Marco eventually dozed fitfully against me, exhausted by fear, while I remained hyper-alert, jumping at every sound, real or imagined. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 45 minutes, I heard footsteps approaching, then Dante's voice. "Sophia? Marco? It's me. You can come out. It's safe now." I practically fell off the couch in my haste to push open the door. Dante stood in his bedroom, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt untucked and slightly disheveled, but otherwise unharmed. His face was tight with stress, but his eyes softened immediately when he saw us. "You're okay," I breathed, and before I could think better of it, I crossed the space between us and threw my arms around him. "Thank God you're okay." Dante's arms came around me immediately, holding me tight. "I'm fine. You're safe. Marco's safe. That's all that matters." Marco stirred against my shoulder, and I pulled back reluctantly. Dante immediately took his son from me, holding him close, his hands signing over and over. "Safe. You're safe. Papa's here. I won't let anything hurt you." "What happened?" I asked quietly. "Unwanted visitors. They've been dealt with." Dante's voice was cold. "They won't be coming back." I didn't ask what dealt with meant. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Is it over?" I asked instead. "The threat?" Dante met my eyes over Marco's head. "The immediate threat? Yes. But Sophia, I need you to understand something. This is my life. This is always going to be my life, to some extent. There will always be people who see Marco as leverage, who see anyone close to me as a potential target." He paused. "That includes you now. By being here, by being important to. Marco, to us you've become someone people might try to use against me." The implication settled over me like a heavy blanket. "You're saying I'm in danger now too." "I'm saying I will do everything in my power to protect you, but yes, there's risk." Dante's expression was pained. "If you want to leave, I'll understand. I can arrange for you to have 24-hour security wherever you go, for as long as necessary. I'm not leaving." The words came out with more certainty than I'd expected. "Marco needs me, and I promised I would see this through." "Sophia, no." I cut him off. "I made a commitment. To Marco, yes, but also to you. I don't break my commitments, Dante. If staying here means accepting some level of risk, then that's what I'll do. Besides," I managed a shaky smile, "I'm a teacher. I'm used to low pay and occasional danger. This is just a different kind of classroom." The joke fell flat, but Dante's expression softened anyway. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both." I reached out to smooth Marco's hair. He'd fallen asleep again against his father's shoulder, exhausted by the emotional upheaval. "Let's get him to bed. We can talk about everything else later." Dante nodded, and together we carried Marco to his room, tucked him into bed, made sure his nightlight was on and his favorite stuffed animal, a bear whose name was, adorably, Bear, was within reach. Marco stirred as we were leaving, his hand reaching out, and I immediately went back to his side. "You're okay?" He signed sleepily. "Papa's okay? You're both staying here?" We're all okay, I signed back. We're all staying here. Nothing bad will happen, I promise. It was a promise I shouldn't have made. I had no control over what might happen tomorrow or next week or next month, but Marco needed to hear it. Needed to feel safe enough to sleep. He nodded, satisfied, and drifted off. In the hallway outside Marco's room, Dante sagged against the freed wall, the full weight of the afternoon's events seeming to hit him all at once. That was too close, he said quietly. If they'd gotten past the gate, if Vincent hadn't been positioned in the garden, if... They didn't. I placed my hand on his arm. You kept us safe. Your security measures worked. Marco is fine. Because you kept calm. Dante looked at me intently. Because you knew exactly what to do, didn't panic, got him to safety. Sophia, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. I was doing my job. It's more than a job. His hand covered mine where it rested on his arm. You have to know that by now. This is more than just teaching Marco. You've become... He broke off, seeming to struggle for words. You've become essential. To both of us. My heart hammered in my chest. We were standing too close. His hand warm over mine. His dark eyes intense and focused entirely on me. The hallway was quiet. The house settled around us. The danger passed, but the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. Dante, I whispered, not sure if I was warning him or encouraging him. He lifted his free hand to my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone in a gesture that was becoming familiar. I'm trying to be professional, he said quietly. I'm trying to maintain appropriate boundaries. I'm trying to remember that you're here for Marco, that getting involved with you would be complicated and probably inadvisable. But Sophia, I'm failing. Every day I'm failing more. I know. My voice was barely audible. I'm failing too. The confession hung between us, heavy with implication. Then Dante was moving closer, his intention clear in his eyes, and I had a split second to pull away, to stop this before it started, to maintain those professional boundaries we'd been pretending still existed. I didn't pull away. His lips met mine gently at first, questioning, giving me every opportunity to stop this. But when I didn't, when I leaned into him instead, my hand fisting in his shirt, the kiss deepened, became something heated and hungry and full of the tension that had been building between us for weeks. Dante's hand moved to the back of my neck, angling my head, and I made a soft sound against his mouth that seemed to break something in him. The kiss turned desperate, demanding, his other arm wrapping around my waist and pulling me flush against him. I shouldn't be doing this. Should push him away, remember my professionalism, think about Marco sleeping just feet away. But all I could think was all I could feel was the solid warmth of Dante's body, the surprising gentleness of his touch despite the intensity of the kiss. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine. That was a terrible idea, he murmured. Probably. I was still gripping his shirt. We should probably not do it again. Probably. His thumb traced my lower lip. But I'm not sorry. Neither am I. We stood in there for a long moment, the truth of what we'd just done settling over us. We'd crossed a line, stepped from professional to personal in a way we couldn't undo. And while part of me knew this complicated everything, the larger part was simply glad it had finally happened. We should talk about this, Dante said finally. About what it means. About what happens next. Tomorrow. I stepped back reluctantly. We've both had enough emotional upheaval for one day. Tomorrow we can talk about boundaries and complications and whatever this is between us. Dante nodded, though his hand caught mine as I turned to leave. Sophia, thank you. For staying. For not being afraid of my world. For being exactly who Marco needs. Who I need. I squeezed his hand. Get some sleep, Dante. We'll figure this out. But as I walked to my room, my lips still tingling from his kiss, my heart still racing, I wondered if there was anything to figure out. If maybe, despite all the complications and danger and professional boundaries I should be maintaining, I'd already made my choice. I'd already chosen to stay, to be part of their lives, to let myself fall for both the boy who needed a teacher and the man who needed someone to see him as more than his reputation. I woke the next morning to sunlight and the disorienting realization that despite yesterday's chaos, I'd slept better than I had in weeks. My fingers touched my lips, remembering Dante's kiss, and heat flooded through me. Downstairs, I found Marco at the kitchen table in his pajamas, signing animatedly to his father. Dante leaned against the counter in gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt, looking relaxed and dangerously attractive. His eyes found mine immediately, and the memory of last night's kiss hung between us, electric and charged. "Good morning, Miss Sophia," Marco signed enthusiastically. "Teresa is making pancakes with chocolate chips because yesterday was scary, so today should be extra good." The simple logic made me smile. Over breakfast, Dante asked to speak with me privately. In his office surprisingly filled with Marco's drawings and crayons alongside the expensive furniture, he closed the door. "I need to tell you something," he said. "About the Castellanos. It's resolved. Permanently. They won't threaten Marco again. Or you." "What does permanently mean?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. "It means I made it clear there are consequences for targeting children. Those men who attempted the kidnapping have been dealt with in a way that sends a message." His jaw tightened. "I won't apologize for protecting my son. I'm not asking you to apologize." I moved closer. "I just need to know, is this over? Are we safe? As safe as anyone can be in my world." He cupped my face. "I can't promise there will never be another threat, but I've done everything possible to protect you both." "Where do you see this going?" I asked carefully. "Us, I mean. This started as temporary teaching, but I'm still here. So what happens now?" Dante was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want to happen?" I asked first. He smiled slightly. "Stubborn woman." Then his expression turned serious. "I want you to stay. Not as Marco's temporary teacher, but as a permanent part of our lives. I want to wake up knowing you're here. I want to build a life with you. If you want that too." "Yes," I said simply. "I want that too." His kiss was thorough and claiming. When he pulled back, he murmured, "Will you tell Marco? About us? He's been asking questions. I think he already knows, but I want to be honest with him." "We tell him together," I decided. "Tomorrow, after lessons." The next few months unfolded like a dream. During the day, I taught Marco. We explored science, practiced language arts, created art that covered every surface. He thrived, his confidence growing daily. We ventured out more museums, aquariums, botanical gardens, always with security but increasingly to normal places. I watched Marco make friends with other deaf children at signing playgroups, saw him communicate freely without barriers. Danny, my younger brother, became a regular visitor. He and Marco bonded immediately. Watching them sign together made my heart full. Dante's signing improved dramatically. He started attending deaf community events with us, making genuine efforts to connect with other deaf adults, showing Marco that his father valued his language and culture. "You're doing really well," I told him one evening in the library, curled against his side. "With everything. You're the kind of parent every deaf child deserves. I have a good teacher." His hand stroked my arm. "I was so wrong at first. I thought making Marco normal was helping him. You showed me that his deafness isn't something to fix. It's just part of who he is." We sat in comfortable silence until Dante said, "I need to tell you, where do you see this going? Us? I want you to stay. Not as a teacher, but as family." "I want that too," I admitted. "I've thought about what it means to be part of your family, with all the complications, and I realized I've fallen in love with both of you. With your whole, complicated, beautiful life." "Say that again." Dante's voice was rough. "The part where you love me. I love you, Dante Moretti. Your intensity, your dedication to Marco, the way you look at me like I'm something precious. All of it. Sophia." He kissed me deeply. "I love you too. I never thought I'd find someone who could accept all the parts of me. Someone who could love me and my son without conditions." We told Marco the next evening after lessons. "Marco, your papa and I need to talk to you about something important," I signed. His expression grew worried. "Is something wrong? Are you leaving?" "No, nothing's wrong," Dante signed quickly. "Everything is very right. We just want to explain something." "You know how much I care about you, right?" I signed. "Well, I also care about your papa very much. Not just as your teacher, but in the way grown-ups care about each other when they want to be a family together." Marco's eyes widened. "Like, you love papa? The way people love each other in movies?" "Yes, exactly like that. And your papa loves me too, which means I'm going to stay here forever, to be part of your family, if that's okay with you." Marco stared at us, processing. Then his face broke into a smile. "Does that mean you'll be here forever? You'll stay? If you want me to stay, then yes, forever." Marco launched himself at me, hugging fiercely. When he pulled back, his hands moved rapidly. "I want you to stay, but you're not my mom. I don't want another mom. The first one was bad at it. I'm not trying to be your mom, I signed carefully. I'm trying to be Sophia, your teacher, your friend, someone who loves you. We can figure out what that looks like together. Marco considered this thoughtfully, then nodded. Okay. But you have to promise you won't leave, Papa says. Promises are important. I promise, I signed, meaning it completely. I'm not going anywhere. Marco's smile was incandescent. Can we watch a celebration movie now? Because Sophia is staying forever? We laughed and agreed that a celebration movie was exactly what we needed. 6 months later, I stood in the garden where everything had changed, but now it was transformed. White chairs, abundant flowers, a small arbor decorated with roses. The lake sparkled beyond, and the late summer sun painted everything golden. I wore a simple white dress, flowers woven through my hair. Danny stood beside me in a suit. You sure about this? He signed with a grin. Last chance to run. I'm not running anywhere, I signed back. The music started. Teresa appeared leading Marco down the aisle, dressed in a tiny suit, carrying the rings with intense focus. When he reached the arbor, he looked back and signed, You look really pretty, Miss Sophia. Papa is going to cry when he sees you. Then I saw Dante under the arbor, and the expression on his face was everything awe and love and disbelief that this was real. The ceremony was conducted in both spoken English and sign language, honoring the deaf culture that had brought us together. When it came time for vows, Dante took my hands. Sophia, you walked into my life and told me to stop yelling at my son because he couldn't hear me. You gave me the tools to connect with Marco, but you gave me so much more patience, guidance, understanding, love when I thought I didn't deserve it. You saw past my reputation and saw me. I promise to honor you, to be a partner worthy of your faith in me, to love you and Marco with everything I have for all my days. I was crying as I spoke my own vows. Dante, I saw a father desperate to connect with his son but didn't know how. You've shown me what it means to grow, to change, to be humble enough to learn. You and Marco have become the center of my world. I promise to stand by you through whatever comes, to love Marco while respecting that you're his father first, to build a life that honors both our worlds. I promise to see you, always, for who you really are. The officiant pronounced us married, and Dante kissed me like I was infinitely precious. The small gathering applauded, and Marco was bouncing, signing finally, with such enthusiasm that everyone laughed. At the reception, I watched Dante dance with Marco, lifting him up and spinning him while the boy shrieked with silent laughter. Later, Dante beckoned me over and wrapped me in his arms. Marco pressed between us. Dance with us, Marco signed. Family dance. We danced together to music that only half of us could hear, but all of us could feel. Happy? Dante murmured. Beyond happy, I replied. This is everything I never knew I wanted. Marco tugged on my dress. I'm glad you married Papa. Now you really are part of our family forever. This is home now, I signed back. You and your Papa, you're my home. As we swayed together, out under the darkening sky, I felt the truth settle into my bones. This family I'd found in the most unexpected way, in a conference room where a desperate father needed help connecting with his son. This love that had grown from professional boundaries to something deeper and more permanent than I'd thought possible. Marco's adoption papers were already in process. Soon, legally and in every way that mattered, Marco would be my son too. What are you thinking about? Dante asked. The future, I admitted. Our future. All the things we're going to do, the life we're going to build. And what do you see? I looked at Marco, then at Dante, his arm secure around my waist, his eyes full of love. I see everything I ever wanted, and everything I need. The music swelled around us, the last light of day painting the garden in gold, and we danced as a family bound by choice rather than blood, by love rather than obligation, by a connection forged in sign language and understanding and the willingness to see each other truly. And it was perfect. The autumn sun filtered through the windows of our expanded classroom, no longer just one room, but an entire wing of the house that Dante had renovated specifically for what had become the Moretti Academy for Deaf Education. I stood at the whiteboard, signing to 8 students ranging from ages 6 to 10, all deaf or hard of hearing, all thriving in this intimate educational setting we'd created. What had started as Marco's private tutoring had evolved into something much larger, a school that combined rigorous academics with full ASL immersion and celebration of deaf culture. Miss Sophia, one of my students, a 7-year-old girl named Lily, signed urgently. Marco's little sister is here. I turned to see Teresa entering with 2-year-old Isabella perched on her hip, her chubby hands already forming baby signs. Our daughter adopted at 6 months old from a deaf family who'd wanted their child raised in a home that understood her world was a whirlwind of energy and personality. "Mama," Isabella signed, reaching for me with grabbing hands. I took her from Teresa, kissing her dark curls. "Hello, my love. Are you being good for Teresa?" "Always," Isabella signed with exaggerated innocence that made the students giggle. Marco, now 9 years old and increasingly mature, stood from his desk and came over to sign to his sister. "We're doing lessons. You have to be quiet." "Quiet," Isabella agreed solemnly, then immediately started babbling in a mixture of signs and sounds. The students laughed, and I couldn't help but smile. This was our life now, chaotic, full, blessed beyond measure. "All right, everyone," I signed. "Let's take an early break. 10 minutes. Then we'll continue with our history lesson." The children scattered to the reading area and play spaces, and I carried Isabella to my desk where she immediately began organizing my papers, which meant scattering them everywhere. My phone buzzed with a text from Dante. "Board meeting running late. Should be home by 4. How's our chaos today?" I typed back, "Beautiful chaos. Isabella is helping me grade papers. Marco is teaching the younger kids how to fingerspell curse words. Normal day." His response was immediate. "Which curse words? I need to know if I should be proud or concerned. The mild ones." I already corrected him. "And Dante, he learned them from your crew, not me. Allegedly. See you at 4. Love you. Love you too." 3 years of marriage had only deepened what we'd built together. Dante had successfully transitioned most of the Moretti family business to legitimate enterprises, real estate development, construction, hospitality. He still maintained connections to his father's world, still commanded respect and occasional fear, but he'd created something new, something Marco and Isabella could be proud of. The threats had never completely disappeared, but they'd become manageable. Dante's reputation for protecting his family was ironclad now. Everyone in Chicago understood. The Moretti children were untouchable. "Miss Sophia?" Marco appeared at my elbow, signing carefully. "Can I talk to you about something?" "Of course." I set Isabella down with some toys and gave Marco my full attention. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated, then signed. "Some kids at the Deaf Community Center were asking about my dad, about what he does, about the rumors." I didn't know what to say. My heart squeezed. We'd known this conversation would come eventually. "What did you tell them?" "That my dad runs businesses, that he protects people, that he's good to our family." Marco's hands moved uncertainly, but they said he's dangerous, that the Moretti name means bad things. I told them they were wrong, but is what they said true? I knelt to his eye level, choosing my words carefully. "Your father comes from a complicated family history. His grandfather and father did things that weren't always legal or right. Your papa is working hard to change that, to build something different. He's not perfect, no one is, but everything he does to protect the people he loves, including you." "So he is dangerous?" "He can be," I signed honestly, "to people who threaten his family. But Marco, dangerous doesn't mean bad. It means powerful. And your father uses his power to keep you safe, to help people who need protection, to build good things. That's what matters." Marco considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Like how you're powerful too? With words and teaching? Just different kinds of power?" "Exactly like that." I smoothed his dark hair. "We all have different kinds of power. What matters is how we use it." He nodded slowly, then hugged me. "I'm glad you're my mom. My real mom. Not the one who left." The words still made my throat tight, even 3 years after his adoption became final. "I'm glad I'm your mom too. So glad." At 4 o'clock, I heard Dante's car in the driveway. Isabella immediately ran to the window, signing, "Papa! Papa!" with enthusiastic bouncing. Dante entered the house, and despite wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase, he immediately dropped everything to scoop up Isabella, who shrieked with delight. Marco ran over for his hug, and Dante managed to embrace both children, while signing "How was school?" to Marco. Then his eyes found mine across the room, and the look he gave me was pure warmth and love, and coming home. "How was the board meeting?" I asked as he approached, Isabella still perched on his hip. "Productive. We finalized the deal for the community center expansion." He kissed me softly. "Which means funding for 3 more classrooms for your school program. If you want them." My heart swelled. Dante had been using his family's wealth to fund deaf education initiatives across Chicago scholarships, interpreter services, technology grants, and expansion of our own school. You didn't have to. I wanted to. He shifted Isabella to his other hip. Education is your passion. Supporting it is mine. Besides, watching you teach, seeing what you've built here, it's incredible, Sophia. You've created something that changes lives. We've created it, I corrected. This is all of us. You, me, Marco, even Isabella with her chaos. Chaos, Isabella signed proudly, clearly knowing this word referred to her. Marco appeared, signing, "Can we have movie night tonight, all of us, with the good popcorn?" Dante looked at me questioningly, and I nodded. Movie night sounds perfect. Later, after the students had been picked up and the house had settled into evening quiet, we gathered in the home theater, our family of 4 plus Teresa, who'd become like a grandmother to the children, and Vincent, who'd evolved from head of security to honorary uncle. Isabella fell asleep against my chest halfway through the movie. Marco leaned against his father's side, both of them signing occasional commentary about the plot. Vincent made terrible jokes that Teresa swatted him for. I looked around at this unlikely family we'd built, a former Mafia boss, turned legitimate businessman, a deaf education teacher, 2 adopted children, a housekeeper who'd become family, and a security guard who'd become a beloved fixture. This wasn't the life I'd imagined when I'd walked into that conference room at Ashford Academy 3.5 years ago. It was better. Messier, more complicated, infinitely richer. Dante's hand found mine in the darkness, squeezing gently. I looked over at him, and he signed one-handed. Happy? Beyond happy, I signed back. This is everything. Everything, he agreed, and in his dark eyes I saw the truth of it, the journey from that angry, lost father who couldn't communicate with his son, to this man who'd learned an entire language for love, who'd transformed his life and legacy, who'd opened his heart to not just me but to building something beautiful from complicated beginnings. Marco shifted against his father, signing sleepily. Best family ever. Best family ever, I agreed, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Outside, the Chicago skyline glittered against the night sky. Inside, we were safe and loved and together. The Moretti family had been reborn not through blood or legacy or tradition, but through choice and love, and the courage to change. And it was perfect. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.